Have you ever walked past an old, decrepit house and felt a shiver run down your spine? A feeling that you're being watched. Today, we're journeying into a place just like that. A place locals call the Haunted House of Little Hills. Tucked away in a remote corner of the countryside, this mansion stands as a decaying monument to a forgotten era. It was once the grand home of a wealthy family, filled with laughter and life. But over the years, that life has been replaced by something much, much darker. Stories swirl around this house, whispered in hushed tones by those who live nearby. Tales of strange lights, chilling sounds, and a sense of dread that clings to the air like a thick fog. Many have tried to live there, drawn by its cheap price and forgotten grandeur. None have stayed for long, and tonight, we're going to find out why. We'll be hearing a first-hand account from someone who dared to spend a night within its walls, someone who experienced the terror that lurks in the shadows. So, turn down the lights, get comfortable, and prepare to enter the Haunted House of Little Hills. Our story begins with a local resident named Mark. He's a skeptic, or at least he was. He had heard all the local legends, the ghost stories told around campfires, but he dismissed them as folklore. To him, the house was just an old, forgotten building. When a friend bet him he couldn't spend one night there, Mark laughed and accepted the challenge. He thought it would be an easy win. He was wrong. Mark arrived just as the sun was setting, casting long, eerie shadows across the overgrown lawn. The house loomed before him, its windows like vacant eyes staring out into the twilight. The air was still, unnaturally so. As he pushed open the heavy oak door, a cloud of dust billowed out, and the smell of decay and damp earth filled his nostrils. The inside was a time capsule of neglect. Furniture was draped in white sheets, looking like silent, shrouded figures. Moonlight streamed through grimy windows, illuminating dust motes, dancing in the air. For the first couple of hours, everything was quiet. Mark explored the downstairs rooms, his flashlight beam cutting through the oppressive darkness. He felt a little on edge, sure, but he chalked it up to the creepy atmosphere. He set up a small camp in the grand living room, right by a massive, cold fireplace. He figured if anything was going to happen, it would happen here. It started subtly, a flicker in his peripheral vision. He'd turn, and there would be nothing there. He told himself it was just his eyes playing tricks on him. Then, he started noticing the shadows. They seemed to move when he wasn't looking directly at them, elongating and twisting in ways that defied the moonlight. One shadow, in the corner of the room, seemed particularly dense, darker than the others. It almost looked like the shape of a tall, thin man, just standing there, watching. Whenever Mark shone his light on it, the shape would vanish, leaving only a bare wall. But as soon as he looked away, he could feel its presence return. A cold spot developed in that corner, a chill that had nothing to do with the night air. The unsettling feeling grew into genuine fear around midnight. That's when the noises began. At first, it was just a faint whisper, like the wind sighing through a keyhole, but there was no wind that night. The sound grew, becoming clearer. It sounded like a woman, softly humming a lullaby. The melody was beautiful, but filled with an incredible sadness. It seemed to come from the floor above, from one of the bedrooms. Mark's heart hammered against his ribs. Eka yet out, his voice trembling. "Hello? Is anyone there?" The humming stopped abruptly. The silence that followed was somehow worse, heavier, charged with anticipation. Then came a different sound. Laughter. Not joyful laughter, but a cold, mocking chuckle that echoed through the cavernous hall. It seemed to come from everywhere at once, bouncing off the walls, surrounding him. He spun around his flashlight beam, slicing wildly through the darkness. But the room was empty. The furniture remained under its white sheets, still and silent. The laughter faded, replaced by the sound of faint footsteps pacing back and forth on the floor above him. Heavy, deliberate steps. Then, a light, quick patter, like a child running down the hallway. Mark was terrified, but a part of him, the stubborn, skeptical part, needed proof. Before he entered the house, he had set up several small, motion-activated security cameras in the main areas of the living room, the main staircase, and the upstairs hallway. He had a small monitor with him. With a shaking hand, it turned it on cycling through the feeds. What he saw made his blood run cold. The camera on the main staircase was showing something impossible. A grandfather clock stood at the bottom of the stairs. As he watched it, the glass door of the clock swung open on its own, slowly, without a sound. Then, just as slowly, it swung shut. No drafts, no vibrations. It just moved. He switched to the living room camera, the one pointed at the very room he was in. He could see himself on the screen, huddled by the fireplace, but in the background, near that dark corner, the footage was glitching. A shadowy figure seemed to coalesce out of the darkness, standing there for a moment before dissipating like smoke. It was tall, just as he'd imagined. He saved the most terrifying feat for last. The upstairs hallway. The camera was pointed down the long, dark corridor. For a few seconds, it was just an empty, spooky hallway. Then, a door at the far end creaked open. A small bowl, like a child's toy, rolled out into the center of the hall. It sat there for a moment before it was violently snatched back into the room, and the door slammed shut with a deafening bang. Mark heard the bang in real time, the sound echoing down to the living room. That was it. He grabbed his gear and ran. He didn't look back. He burst out of the front door, and didn't stop running until the house was just a dark silhouette against the moonlit sky. Mark was no longer a skeptic. The footage he captured became something of a local legend itself, passed around among friends, a digital ghost story. But it also prompted him to do some digging. What had happened in that house? He spent weeks in the local library archives, poring over old newspapers and town records, and that's when he found it. Nearly a century ago, the house belonged to the wealthy Weatherby family, Mr. and Mrs. Weatherby and their 2 young children. They were well-liked pillars of the community. Then, one day, they vanished. The official story was that they had moved away suddenly, without telling anyone. But the truth was far more sinister. An old, forgotten police report detailed a gruesome discovery. A traveling salesman, visiting the house, had found the entire family. They had been murdered in their sleep. The case was never solved. The killer was never found. The article mentioned that Mr. Weatherby had recently fired a groundskeeper, a tall, thin man known for his volatile temper. But there was never enough evidence to charge him. The pieces fell into place. The humming lullaby of a mother trying to soothe her children. The laughter of a cruel intruder. The footsteps of a panicked family and the running of a small child. And the tall, dark shadow in the corner. The spirits of the Weatherby family weren't just haunting the house. They were trapped, reliving their final, terrifying moments over and over again. They weren't malevolent. They were victims, but perhaps another spirit lingered there. To the spirit of their killer, forever bound to the scene of his horrific crime. The House of Little Hills still stands today, silent and waiting. The locals say that on quiet nights, if you listen closely, you can still hear the echoes of that tragedy. You might hear a mother's sad song, a child's frightened footsteps, or the cold, cruel laughter of a killer. They say the family's still there, searching for peace, while the shadow that took their lives continues to stalk the halls. So, a word of warning to any urban explorers or thrill seekers who might feel drawn to its dark history. The doors may be unlocked, but you are not welcome. To enter the house is to step into a memory, a waking nightmare from which there may be no escape. You might just become the next audience for a tragedy that never truly ended, and encounter the restless souls who are forever trapped within its walls. Thanks so much for watching this chilling tale. If you have a local legend or a spooky story you'd like to share, drop it in the comments below. We'd love to hear it. And if you enjoyed this journey into the dark, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the notification bell so you don't miss our next adventure into the unknown. Stay safe, and see you next time.